Hello and welcome to part 2 of News24's Frontline Year in Review. I'm Devi, and what we're going to be doing for the next 20 minutes is taking stock of what was really quite an extraordinary year. Unprecedented events, I think that goes without saying, but events that changed the world as we knew it. And who better than journalists than to take us behind the scenes of some of the events and give us an idea of what it was like covering the story firsthand. Joining me online, we've got Juanita Hunter, News24 political editor, Peter du Toit, assistant editor, and we've also got Sport24 deputy editor, Sibusiso Mjikeliso. Guys, thanks so much for joining us, but we're going to be starting our particular discussion here on state capture, the ANC, Ace Magashule. There's a lot to unpack, so let's try and get through this as quickly as possible. Peter, I mean, it definitely was one of the biggest stories of this year. The arrest of several high-profile individuals connected to allegations of state capture and corruption. And Ace Magashule became the face of state capture in South Africa, and he was finally arrested. But what does this say about where we're at in this particular never-ending saga?
Debbie, yes. Well, what does it say where we're at? At long last, things are starting to happen, and I think that's the most important takeaway. When the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Shamila Batoy, was appointed, she was very clear that she wasn't going to rush to go to court. She was never going to rush to indict and charge individuals. And the National Prosecuting Authority, which is the body in charge of this, was one of those institutions that under state capture suffered the most. It has been in the middle of political fights for more than a decade. It lost enormous capability and capacity, and it had to be built up pretty much from scratch.
So there was a lot of noise about the fact that there seemed to have been a slowness, if I can even use that word, that it was taking too long. Why was it important that it did take long and there was time put to it?
Well, the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Shamila Batoy, when she took office, was very clear about the fact that she was not going to rush to court. She was not going to rush investigations. And the moment that she goes to court, or when the NPA decides to charge someone, it would be on the back of proper investigation and proper consideration by the head of public prosecutions. And the fact that Ace Magashule, someone of his political stature, someone of his clout, was charged, did appear in court, is an enormous victory, I think, for the NPA, who over the last decade has been gutted, one of the institutions that suffered the most under state capture. So where are we? We are in a place where at long last things are starting to happen, but of course we can only celebrate once we see convictions.
Juanita, let's bring you in here. Now, you've met Ace Magashule. You've been following him for so many years. What kind of person do you think he is, and what's currently going through his head right now?
I think he's extremely defiant, and I think that this was something that he expected. He knew it was coming, but he's sort of outraged that the law had eventually caught up with him. And I think that the arrogance of all of these years, despite facing these accusations from so many years ago, that he's still, it's the arrogance that has now come out to say, how dare they touch me? And you saw that when he made his first appearance in court in relation to the asbestos case. He's now facing 21 charges of corruption. But we know from the Zondo Commission, we know from our own reportage that the asbestos case is not going to be the only case that he's going to be implicated in. There's also Estina that's outstanding. There's other cases in the Free State when he was Premier of the Free State, that he opened doors, that he looked away, and now it's for the courts now and for the criminal justice system to take its course.
And Juanita, staying with you, what do you think is the influence, though, of the recent arrest on factional divisions within the ANC? Because every time you're opening the paper, there's a new theory about what's happening within the top 6, within the ANC, all these stories, but do you think there could actually be a direct result? A happens, then B happens, and Cyril Ramaphosa could actually find himself in trouble.
Yeah, so I think that Ace Magashule's arrest is going to be the greatest test of the ANC's factions, and there's only one faction that can emerge on top, and it's yet to be seen which one it is. I think that it's clear that his faction are made up of people who are themselves facing charges, are themselves have clouds over their heads, and they're obviously clinging on to for dear life. They're creating this narrative that law enforcement agencies are being used for political divisions, without substantiating it and without any evidence to that regard. And so what you're going to see now is that you have people who are seen to be pushing for clean governance, for their anti-corruption sentiments, and then you have those who are sort of trying to not let the law catch up with them. And so it's sort of the friction between the two, and been going on for the entire year. We saw it from June. It play out in ANC, NEC meetings. It plays out and out and out. And now you're at a stage now where eventually it's going to crack. And there's only going to be one faction that can sort of come out on top. And it's yet to be seen, who will actually win in the ANC.
It's anybody's guess. Because, I mean, I'm sure that's the question you get asked most, even in your personal life. Who's going to come out on top?
Absolutely. And I think, it's difficult to not go back all the way to the ANC Nazareth conference and know that it was the outcome of that conference, and the leadership of the ANC was a sort of a manifestation of a compromise. It was a bringing together of this so-called unity slate, and definitely you're going to have cracks in that, because it's two different formations standing for two completely different things coming together under one umbrella called the ANC. And there's been warning after warning that it's just not going to last. And Ramaphosa's efforts to paper over the cracks is just not going to be as successful as he thinks it's going to be.
Peter, what everybody wants to know right now is, are we going to see more arrests? Are people going to end up in jail wearing orange overalls?
We're definitely going to see more arrests. That much is certain. The National Prosecuting Authority, Shamila Batoy, you remember they established the investigative directorate under the leadership of Hermione Cronje. They're looking at very specific and very complicated financial cases, including alleged corruption at Eskom and other places. So we are going to see movement there as well. But we're also going to see movement in lesser known corruption cases. We're going to see movement on municipal level, on provincial level, where a lot of the grand corruption happens. In the media, we enjoy writing about the big stories, the big Gupta stories, the big state capture stories. But where the biggest amounts of taxpayers' money actually gets lost is on municipal level, is on provincial level. So we'll see movement there. But again, we should not count our chickens until they've hatched. The proof will be seeing politicians, mid-level government employees in orange overalls being convicted, and that's going to be the test. We're still a constitutional state. All these allegations needs to be tested in a court of law. And let's not forget the State Capture Commission. A lot of the stuff that we will see happen next year, a lot of arrests and investigations will emanate from that too. So it's a long way that we still have to go. But I think the big takeaway from this year is we've at long last started seeing movement. We've seen arrests. We've seen the NPA starting to get back its teeth.
Thanks very much for that. Now, I just want to quickly segue to another story, a big story of the year, and that's to Black Lives Matter. So let's just pivot to just that, because I think we're quite insular here, and we tend to watch our own goings on through these very tiny little eyes. But another story that was brewing internationally would eventually actually make it onto our news pages. Remember that the Black Lives Matter movement started with protests in America, and that was after the killing of George Floyd. And it became this global movement. But for some reason in South Africa, it concentrated around sport. So joining the conversation now is Sibusiso Mjikeliso. He's the Sports24 deputy editor. Sibusiso, how are you? But please explain to us, why is it, you think, to a large extent, the Black Lives Matter campaign landed squarely in terms of sport in South Africa?
Thanks, Debbie. For sport in South Africa, I think the biggest gripe was lack of opportunities. Black Lives Matter concentrated a lot on lack of opportunities. And I think because sport is such a short career, and because a lot of its selection and a lot of everything around you getting that opportunity is very subjective. So it's not necessarily like other professions where, to some degree, your qualifications and your ability to do the job can often supersede other discriminatory factors. Not to say that it doesn't happen in outside of sport professions, of course it does. But in sport, the frustration is twice as much, because if you have a 10-year career in sport, a successful 10-year career where you're in international in either cricket, rugby, or football, that is a very, very good career that you've had. So typically between 5 and 7 years is what a professional sporting career would be as a top earner. So opportunities are very, very prized, and to have them taken away or delayed or pulled back because of the color of your skin really builds up that frustration. And I think that's exactly why Black Lives Matter concentrated so much on sport in South Africa.
So why do you think there was almost this covenant of silence then amongst all these players for such a long time?
It's exactly that subjectivity. It's fear. It's dressing room bonds that people don't want to break. I mean, if you've got a Makhaya Ntini and a Graham Smith that have toured together, that have played for the national team for 15 odd years, at some level they do have a bond as players. However, the inability for Makhaya to be able to voice out his frustration, and the unawareness from Graham Smith of what was happening is kind of both are a symptom of what was happening in the Proteas environment. I'll use that as an example because that was one of the biggest stories to come out of Black Lives Matter. So also, again, that fear I spoke about. Sports stars are fearful of opportunities during and after their playing careers because they want to be a coach, they want to be an umpire, etc.
So we did hear from several Black players. We heard from Makhaya Ntini, we heard from Ashwell Prince, both saying that they felt highly isolated in the Proteas camp because of their race. But then we also saw a fair amount of pushback from former players. You had Pat Simcox, you had Boeta Dippenaar. How do you go about then researching a story like this? How difficult was it to get Black players to speak about their experience? So, because I get it, there's that feeling of I need to say something, but there's that feeling of I still need to get something, I still need to live.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at how in cricket it became such a hot topic, it came from Lungi Ngidi, just basically saying his opinion. He didn't make any bold gesture. He didn't want to be a hero to anybody. He didn't, plaster. He didn't, plaster any symbols. He didn't take a knee or anything like that. He answered a question that he was asked what he thought of Black Lives Matter, and he said he would support it and he would speak to his fellow Proteas about supporting the movement. And then that created was a knee-jerk reaction on both sides, I guess, whereby you found the Pat Simcox and Boeta Dippenaar side where they said, no, this is anti what the Proteas badge should be. They don't take a knee they don't bow down to anybody because of religious reasons. And whereas the Black former players were empowered to say that, look, we're gonna stand up against the pushback to Lungi Ngidi because we've felt what he's felt, even though he hasn't really said he wants to be the face of it, and we are gonna be the ones that say, bring the heat on us because we've got the stories to tell and we don't have a career on the line.
So picking up on exactly that, why did taking the knee and that whole issue become such a polarizing matter in South African sport? And how do you think the different sporting codes dealt with that, or in fact didn't deal with it?
I think it was polarizing because Black Lives Matter is misunderstood, or it means differently to different people. Even within Black people, it means something different. It means a call against overt racism. It means a call against systematic racism. So it is however you interpret it. But it can also mean to some people as taking away opportunities from white people, which I think is where the miscommunication or where it's misconstrued, where you get one side saying, we need to be seen, we need to, you know, voice our opinion that we're not given the opportunities, we're not getting a fair chance at being Proteas, at being Springboks. And that is being taken to mean that we want, you know, so-and-so's place to be taken by so-and-so, you know, a black player to replace a white player, which is absolutely not the truth. You'll never find a black player anywhere in the world that says, I want to be picked because of my race. But you will hear them say, I want an equal opportunity as a white player to show my ability to prove my ways.
Do you think anything changed or anything will change as a result of the movement? Or put it on the table.
Yeah. No, I'm hopeful because what you saw was the former players, former Proteas, more than 30 of them organized, and they took on Cricket South Africa head on. They want a seat at the Cricket South Africa boardroom. They want the memorandum of incorporation to be changed to include a former player's seat in the subcommittees such as transformation, such as the cricketing committee, where decisions that impact current players, they can have an input in. I know that former rugby players as well, even though they've not organized quite as vociferously, they've also had conversations with SA Rugby. And I've heard that they also want to organize and be part of the actual system that they want to change. So they are also pushing that constitutionally, they should be allowed a bigger voice and not just be told by administrators who, most of whom don't know what it's like to be in a Springbok dressing room. So it's those guys that have felt, hey, I used to play this game and I can contribute. And now that I'm a coach, I'm not even finding a coaching job. If you look at the current Curry Cup campaign that's on the go at the moment, there's 7 head coaches, all of whom are white. So you've got all these former players, qualified coaches, and they can't get opportunities in the very game that they played.
As always, with any kind of interview, you need like an extra hour. But we've run out of time. Sibusiso, thanks very much. Juanita, Peter, who are also there in the background, thanks very much for sharing your thoughts on the particular stories that you worked on. But this is where we sign off. If you missed part 1 of our conversation, which focused specifically on COVID-19 and News24's 7-month investigation into Kwasi's Abantu mission in KwaZulu-Natal, you can now find it online. But remember, for continued in-depth reporting, for opinions, for analysis, and if you'd like to support News24's journalists, you can do so simply by becoming a subscriber. And all you need to do is look for the red subscriber button, which is on the website, or you can download it via the News24 app on your phone or on your tablet. Yeah, and that's it. Thanks for joining us for this particular 2-parter from me and the News24 team. Keep safe, and may 2021 bring us a much better horizon. Signing off.